This is Frank Simon with the rest of the news, and our special guests tonight are Cindy Marlowe and Kent Ostrander from the Family Foundation. And we appreciate our guests being here today. And we wanted to ask Kent, who is an expert, what is going on with the expanded gambling issue here in Kentucky?
Well, as many people know, our attorney, Dan Case, fought the battle in court for 10 years. He finally won 7-0, and that was announced by the Supreme Court on September 24th. And then the racetracks and the Kentucky Horse Racing Commission appealed it and asked the court to reconsider. It's the highest court, so they couldn't appeal higher. And on January 21st, the Supreme Court said, nope, there's no reason to appeal it. We've made our right decision. So they declared these machines that had been operating for at least 9 years to have been illegal. And what in essence happened, layman's term, is that the gambling industry, the racetracks, gambled and lost. Unfortunately, as many people know, last night the legislature in the House passed Senate Bill 120, the last step in this bill's passage. It successfully redefined what pari-mutuel means, so they changed the law rather than change the machine. And I don't know how this is valid. They retroactively gave the racetracks immunity for all of the $800 million that they had unlawfully and illegally taken from Kentucky citizens.
Wow, that's amazing.
So when you say they unlawfully take it from the Kentucky citizens, how was that?
They brought the court case 10 years ago. Governor Steve Beshear had run on a campaign in 2007 saying, we're going to let the people decide on this gambling issue. And what he meant there was he was going to run a constitutional amendment. Well, he ran it for 3 years, the first 3 years, 2008, 2009, 2010, and the General Assembly did not pass that. So out of frustration, the governor, Steve Beshear, turned to his horse racing commission and said, let the courts do it. That's a wide open door for judicial activism. And so they began the case, called the Greed case, because they didn't have any opposition. We smelled a rat with that gambling industry going to the courts and telling us and asking them to tell us whether we're legal or not. So we entered the case, were granted entrance, and started our 10-year battle with them, in which Stan won all but one decision, and that first decision was thrown back to the court and remanded to allow us to do discovery, which has been banned. So Stan Cave did an outstanding job and proved that the machines were not pari-mutuel as they were required to be by state law. And that's why they were illegal.
Now, when you say pari-mutuel, you want to explain that to our audience so they can understand what that means?
Sure. Pari-mutuel is a French phrase. Pari means wager. Mutuel, you can imagine, means mutually or from or with. And we all see how that happens with the racetrack. Hundreds, if not thousands of people are wagering, and they change the odds of the race as they make their wagers. And then the winners get their portion of the wagers. With these machines, they are a one-person machine. Each person has his own machine, and a machine pulls out a race randomly out of 100,000 races, and then he pushes the button when he wants to. He's actually not wagering with anyone else. Who's he wagering with? The kids, the mom. And so it's not pari-mutuel. It's more pari-serial, where everybody's wagering in a series, one right after the other. That's one of the reasons why it was not pari-mutuel.
What is the problem with that, though, between the pari-series and the pari-mutuel? What is your all's argument with saying that's not good?
The point is, it did not live up to the law. We are a nation of laws, and we believe in the rule of law. And in Kentucky, there are 3 kinds of gambling that are legitimized. One is charitable gaming, and that was passed with the Constitutional Amendment. One is the lottery, that was also passed with the Constitutional Amendment. And then there's pari-mutuel horse racing, which was settled by Supreme Court decision in the the 1920s, I believe, maybe 1930s, the Jockey Club division. But there's no other forms of gambling that are allowed. And so clearly these machines are not the lottery. They're not charitable gaming. So they're legal. They have to be pari-mutuel. And they were not pari-mutuel. So what you had then was the pari-mutuel horse industry just trying to gather money from other people, claiming that this was pari-mutuel, when in fact all the while it was not. They went ahead and invested several $100 million in facilities and in machines and opened up and started using the machines and getting revenue from Kentucky citizens. And they kept doing that, and they enjoyed the fact that our court case took forever because they were paying their attorneys was just a part of doing business. But they were bringing in $8 to $10 million to handle on these machines every day. And so they enjoyed the fact that we never got to the Supreme Court. And finally we did, and the court basically said, these are illegal machines, and that meant that they had taken over $800 million from Kentucky citizens.
Imagine that.
In an illegal gaming enterprise. And so our complaint was, when is Churchill Downs, these racetracks, when are they going to pay back the citizens that they unlawfully took money from? And sadly enough, believe it or not, in Senate Bill 120 that was just passed last night, there's a phrase in there that says that anybody who has a license based on 2010 or after is legitimately authorized to use these machines.
So they kind of did a post facto.
Yes, ex post facto, retroactive. It's a little bit like somebody's robbing a bank 2 years ago and his dad powerful. His dad may be able to get some legislators to draft a bill that says if you take a large deposit out of a bank, last 10 years, it's okay. Large withdrawal out of the bank.
It's amazing.
It was embarrassing. So where they got us, they used very crafty verbiage. They pointed out that many people had been brought on board this gambling scheme. A lot of them would lose their jobs. And very few legislators wanted to vote to help people lose their jobs.
Yeah,
so that empathy factor won the day.
What's wrong is what's wrong regardless of empathy. We can have empathy for people, but say so-and-so killed so-and-so because they just didn't like them or they were doing something that was bothering them. Well, we have sorry for them because they were abused as a child. Well, they still killed someone. Do you see what I'm saying?
Absolutely. The question of are we going to have the rule of law or decisions made by empathy? The whole question about the southern border of America. Clearly, the rule of law is you have to come through a proper channel to be an immigrant. And there's nobody that's concerned about the border that isn't open to having legal immigrants. But the empathy of folks throw the law away and say, yeah, in fact, Biden has just done this again. Just go ahead and come in if you want. You don't
Forget the law.
You don't have to show up at your hearing. It's sad.
I was thinking when you were telling me this earlier, when we talked earlier this morning, that if I was the legislator down there, I'd say, well, then the people who have these jobs, well, first off, they were working in a position that was illegal. And they maybe didn't know about it, but I would just say as a legislator, go and just make this particular building that you spent millions of dollars on another industry, make it a hotel or create another business there to keep these people employed. But we are not going to go against what the high courts have decided what is legal gambling and what isn't. There was ways they could have gotten around it, but I'm sorry, once again, they have not stood up for what's right.
Now, Kent, I'm reading your press release, which I thought was outstanding. And it says that eventually the state of Kentucky will lose because it only gets a tiny bit of taxes from the machines, and the supporters of this bill refuse to raise taxes.
We're hoping that that's not accurate, but it is true that the machines pay 1.5% on the handle. That's the amount that's wagered. But of that 1.5%, a full 1%, 2/3 of that money goes back to the horse industry. It's a little bit like you paid, say, $4,000 in income tax, but then the state gives you back $1,000 to improve your house and $1,000 to help you buy a new car. So technically, you've only paid $1,000 in taxes. Well, this these machines, 1/3 of it, a 0.5%, goes to the state, and a full 1% goes to purses and goes to the breeders' fund and things like that. So the horse industry is already being subsidized by the state through that taxation policy there. And unfortunately, these tracks, besides the tax that does go into purses and helps people make more money as it trickles down to them, the tracks are themselves making hundreds of millions of dollars coming into their profit coffers and paying nothing but that 1.5%.
So it says the Kentucky horse industry may eventually lose out too because they're not making that much money on this gambling.
Well, yeah, the reality is people can lose a lot more money a lot faster on these machines. Case in point, Nevada used to have a horse racing track.
Yes.
But there's nothing. If a horse racing track was as profitable as a casino or as a slot machine, you know there'd be a horse racing track there.
Exactly.
When you think about the cost of buying a horse, breeding a horse, training a horse, raising a horse, feeding a horse, transporting a horse, and then having a huge track to have to maintain with parking lots and everything, it's much easier to put up a casino and have people get addicted to machines that are designed to get them addicted.
Wow.
So in a sense, the horse racing industry is going downhill is what you're thinking, right?
Well, even the people in the horse racing industry have noted that it's going downhill. Now, I'm not here to speak doom and gloom to the horse industry, but the number of races has declined, the number of purses have declined in a lot of areas, and the purses are being buoyed by this kind of artificial, let's do other gambling, bring in money, and boost the purses. Well, at some point, someday, Churchill or some company like it will say, why are we spending all this money on horse tracks, horse races, when we can just go ahead and make the same money and keep it all with slot machines and table games?
Wow.
That's what they did in
Las Vegas.
Nevada. So there are many horsemen that will privately tell you that the horse industry is on its way out. And part of that is because horse racing is the sport of kings. It's amazing. Man and beast thundering around a track. It is actually amazing. But in today's society, they want more violence, whether it be boxing or football, or excitement. And these machines, as every teenage kid does, has his head buried in some kind of computer game. These things have been cultivated to incite people and excite people, keep them addicted.
Like a virtual reality. It's really sad that everything's going to virtual reality. And they're not, instead of going, like you said, and seeing the amazing, beautiful horses in person, it's all going to virtual reality.
It is very unfortunate. And the interesting thing, in the various hearings we were in, I'm not talking about the court case, but in this session, we testified both in the Senate hearing and in the House hearing. They were talking about how this would save the industry. But it actually will likely kill the industry in the long run.
Wow.
Because the tracks are now realizing that they have a good, steady stream of income coming in from these slot-like machines. So if the horse industry dies, who cares? It's just one less expense for them. They can continue to have these quasi-gambling parlors across the state. Now, here's something else. 15 years ago, when we fought the battle where the racetracks were trying to set up casinos, they argued we'll pay a license fee of $200 million, $300 million, $400 million for a license to have a casino. Show you what I call corruption. In the last 10 years, during the court case, while the court was going to answer the question they asked, are these machines legal? The Kentucky Horse Racing Commission was giving away licenses for free. Years ago, church and pounds may have had to pay $400 million for one license. That's the only thing they would get. They've already got 5 licenses now, and they didn't pay a dime for them. It's a sad circumstance. I don't want anyone to lose their job, but those jobs are the responsibility of the corporation who hired them.
Exactly, not the states.
Now, here's another quote from your news release. It says, it looks like a win for the horse industry, but it really is a loss because there's a sad day that what you just talked about, that not going to be able to maintain these racing tracks.
That will take a while, but basically the horse industry, the horse racing industry, will be hand in hand to these casinos. Please give us more money. Please subsidize it. That's not a good place to be.
I have a question too, Kim. How many of these places that hire these people, how many buildings or structures are there in Kentucky?
I wish I could tell you that. We're only getting started. So what we know is that over the last 9 years, as they've been starting up, they've taken $800 million from Kentucky citizens.
$800 million.
The handle is what's been wagered, and that's several $billion. But actually, the tracks have taken $800 million, and that's just getting started. They have probably 3,600 machines operating now. They've already been authorized for 7,500 of them, double. And the numbers that I gave you, for a while, there was only 1 or 2 tracks operating. So the number will rise very rapidly, both the number of machines operating and how much they take in.
And when you say taken from the citizens, you're talking about not through taxes, but through they're actually using their own money,
gambling
away from their bills and paying their bills.
And during the testimony, well, we heard it twice actually, they talk about how this machine pay out 90% of the time. And that generally means if you go with $100, you'll leave with 90. That's not always true, but in the long haul, as you go ad infinitum, you lose 10% of your money. That's exactly what slot machines normally take out. So it was funny, they were defending them as this is good because they pay out 90% of the time. But that's exactly what slots do. They didn't even realize what they were saying. Well, loose slot will pay out at 94%. Sometimes you see advertisements, come here, we've got loose slots, which means they're dialed up to pay out more often. And 90% sounds good, but here's the way I like to look at it. If you're a widget salesman, your widget costs you $100 and you're selling them for $90.
You've lost $10
every time. The joke is, you ask the salesman, how are you going to make any money when you're selling for $10 less than you pay for it? And he says, well, the answer is volume. I'm going to sell a whole lot of them.
That's still the same.
That's what these slot machines are based on. It's based on volume, where everyone's losing a little bit. And the machines, of course, light up and give you a thrill and give you 3 rounds where you can't win any money, but you get to play a little bit and make you feel like you're winning when in fact you're losing. It's a sad circumstance. Addiction by design. Scholl, MIT professor who studied 15 years on her book, 400 pages talking about these machines. She talks about how people get into a machine trance, like self-medicating. They forget about all their cares and their worries, and they're just pushing that button. Some of them will wear Depends.
Oh, my word.
I have heard worse stories than that I'm not going to repeat on the radio here, but it's very common for people to get on their machine and get locked in, and that's their machine, and they know they're going to win when in fact they're losing.
Well, let me tell you a personal story. When I was 17, my mom and dad took me and my sister out west. It was after I'd graduated from high school in 75. And I wanted to go to Las Vegas. And my dad says, we don't want to go to Las Vegas. We don't gamble. And I said, oh, Daddy, let's just go see what it looks like. And he said, well, okay. So we went and stayed at the Flamingo Hilton and Connie Stevenson. And so we walked in. We stayed there. And Daddy says, well, you can't go into the gambling. And he didn't gamble, but he let me put in a quarter, or I think it was 50. It wasn't very much money. And honey, I won all this money. I won it came down and it was a slot machine. And I think I won $50 worth of quarters. And then the guy came up and says, how old is your daughter? And he said 17. She says, well, she's not legal to do it. But anyway, my dad was so upset with me that I put that quarter in there. He made me and my sister go back to the room. And him and my mother went around, and he said he was able to preach for at least 2 or 3 sermons on it. He saw people foaming at the mouth.
Oh, my goodness.
And so he actually used the trip as a way to tell people to stay away from this addiction. And he said it was truly appalling to think that people would spend their money, and he said they were actually foaming, some of them. And of course, all the stuff that goes with it, the girls and all that. But that was my experience, and that's the only time I've ever been to Las Vegas.
It's interesting because I've always said, best way to gamble is play one time, win, and walk away.
Exactly.
Forever. Kent has been fighting this fight for, I guess,
15 years?
Oh, at least.
I've been fighting since 1994, 26 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's more than I thought.
We really owe him a debt, and he shows you that you're going to lose if you keep it up long enough. And I had a friend who went to a big casino city, and it was like a slum. In other words, the whole thing deteriorates with time. The gambling industry walks off with the money.
That's right. Pawn shops develop around
Yes.
But whatever they have to get more money because they know they're going to hit a big when in fact they're not.
Prostitution? When did prostitution become legal in Las Vegas? It's been a while.
It's been several decades. It's probably back in the 70s or 80s.
Yes, it's a long time.
They have a general assembly just like ours, made up of moms and dads and grandparents, just like ours, and voted to legalize prostitution. And the question is, why was that? Is it because they wanted good jobs for women, or was it the fact that the gambling industry wanted prostitution? Every legislator knew that if he didn't vote the way the gambling industry wanted, they would have opposition funded by the gambling industry in the next election. And that's exactly what happened in this situation. When you look at the fact that the Senate had 30 members in it, and the Senate brought the bill, the majority party, 30 out of 38 people, brought the bill up when there were only 15 people for it in their caucus. And so the Republicans voted 15 for and 15 against, and the 7 Democrats decided, and they all voted for it. Rules are common. Most people don't understand this, that when you have a majority party, that caucus of those majority members decide what they're going to do. And in this case, the bill came forward with 15 Republicans on one side and 15 on the other. That's like a young minister getting a new church and speaking with the deacons. Half want to add his new structure to the building, the new building project. The other half don't. Is it wise for the pastor to move forward with half of your deacons for it?
No.
So why they did that? It was pressure. As many as 60 lobbyists were there working.
Wow. The thing that I remember most about the gambling issue is that eventually the gambling industry becomes so powerful that they can pick and choose who they want to win the election.
Exactly.
If you have a Christian legislator, they can run somebody against him and get him out of there and replace him with someone that will do what the gambling industry wants them to do.
Do their bidding, shall we say.
And they can take over the whole government.
That actually is the number one reason why I oppose gambling. I've got a number of reasons. But the long-term effect, what we know is this. I'm not sticking my finger at any particular person, but generally speaking, the gambling industry doesn't have values. It only has one value. They like your money. The businessmen believe that. They want everybody. They don't care about what's right and wrong. They just want your money.
Imagine that.
They're valueless, and that is a very serious concern as the gambling industry grows in Kentucky.
And I certainly want to thank you for leading the charge to protect our state from the gambling industry. Like you say, that they want to basically trash our state. And as I understand it, there was a time when gambling was legal in Kentucky, but it became so corrupt that they passed that you couldn't gamble unless you made a constitutional amendment. Is that right?
That is correct. That was back with lotteries in the late 1800s, and they were all corrupt, and they were going across the nation, and people were losing everything. And that's why a number of states shut down gambling. But over time, it's creeping back, just like we had experienced this week.
Unbelievable.
For your encouragement, Frank. But I want to just say, I want to thank God for Stan Cade, labored for 10 years.
Wow.
Patiently, he stood toe-to-toe. I watched him one time with 14 different attorneys on the other side.
Wow.
He did amazing work. We all ought to thank God for Stan's willingness to put himself in harm's way. It cost him dearly because there are a lot of folks that won't use his services anymore because he won't stand.
He did what was right, and these are the kind of men
That
and
we
women
need.
that I love to see in society, because these people down in Frankfurt are worried about staying on the next term instead of doing what's right. And so instead of him worrying about his career, he knew he was standing up for what was right. God will bless him.
Okay, now here's Kent with the Family Foundation out of Lexington. And that's been around quite a while. And Kent has been a real warrior for the things of God for many, many years. And we certainly thank God for him.
Well, let's ask him one more thing. Is there anything you can do at all to change this somehow? Is your plans to do anything?
There's perhaps some minor tweaks that can be done, but not to reverse it at this point. And I want to say this, Frank, thank you for your compliment. I've been around for a long time, but you've been around longer.
I came over with a Christopher Columbus.
Well, we're about out of time here. We're going to talk next week about the impeachment. But Kent, you were very valuable today.
Yeah,
Thank
that
you
was
so
tremendous.
Much.
Thank you so much, Kent Ostrander and the Family Foundation.
God bless you all.
God bless you, Kent.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Wow.
Is it in here?
Yeah, so you want to, I guess, off the show, we'll do the impeachment.
God bless you. Thanks for listening, and tune again next week for the rest of the news. And we're going to try to talk a little bit about the impeachment of Governor Beshear, who's trying to shut down our state. Thank you, and see you next week.
Christians from different backgrounds meeting together in nature to pray and worship and seek God. We're trying to see God by looking at his creation, starting to understand his invisible qualities as we reflect on all that he's done in nature. This is an interactive experience, engaging for everybody that's here, and it's a chance for the church to get out of the pews and into a God's eye view. Welcome to Church in the Wild. I'm Pastor Aaron Scott. Let's go.
Hi, I'm Dr. Frank Simon. I'm an allergist and family doctor, board certified in both allergy and internal medicine. I specialize in allergy, headaches, sinus, hives, cough, asthma, hypertension, and diabetes. We're located at 1404 Browns Lane, near Norton Suburban Hospital. Our phone number is 895-5088. We can see you tomorrow.